The city feared Adrien Moretti because he never hesitated. Until the night he heard a girl called Điêu Thuyền. Rain slid down the glass walls of the rooftop restaurant in silver streaks, turning Manhattan into a blur of white lights and shadows beneath us. At 34 years old, I had seen powerful men beg for mercy over less than what sat calmly in front of me that night. A betrayal. A stolen shipment. A trusted name whispered to the wrong family. My fingers rested against the rim of a crystal whiskey glass, while 4 men across the table waited for me to decide someone's future. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. That was how meetings with Adrien Moretti worked. Silence first. Fear second. Then consequences. The pianist near the bar had been playing soft jazz for the past hour. Forgettable background noise for rich people pretending they weren't terrified to breathe too loudly around me. Then the music changed. One violin note floated through the restaurant. Thin. Fragile. Beautiful enough to cut through every conversation in the room. My hand stopped moving. The sound hit somewhere deep inside my chest like a memory refusing to stay buried. Another note followed. Then another. Slow. Melancholy. Familiar. The whiskey glass slipped from my fingers before I realized what was happening. Crystal shattered across the marble floor. Every man at the table froze instantly because in 10 years, nobody had ever seen me lose control over anything. Marco, my head of security, stood so fast his chair scraped against the floor. Boss. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Across the rooftop, near the edge of the terrace where the rain tapped softly against the windows, a woman stood beneath a golden spotlight holding a violin beneath her chin. White dress. Dark blonde hair falling over one shoulder. Pale skin glowing under the chandelier light. She couldn't have been older than 26. The room blurred around her. All I could hear was the music. My pulse slowed and quickened at the same time. Something impossible my body did anyway whenever the past came too close. Because I knew that melody. 15 years disappeared in a single breath. Fire. Smoke. Sirens somewhere far away. A little girl kneeling beside me while ash drifted through the air like snow. Don't become like them, she had whispered while pressing something cold into my hand. I blinked hard, forcing myself back into the present. The violinist lowered her bow slightly, nervous now that the entire restaurant was staring at her instead of their dinners. She looked human. Soft. Completely unaware that half the men in this building would jump off the rooftop if I told them to. Then the elderly Vietnamese hostess beside the stage smiled gently toward her, and said words that made my blood turn cold. Her grandmother used to call her Điêu Thuyền. The name hit me harder than a bullet ever could. My chair moved backward before I consciously stood up. Marco stepped closer immediately. Adrien, he warned quietly. But I was already walking toward her. Slow. Careful. Like moving too fast might make her disappear again. The closer I got, the more details destroyed me. The silver necklace around her throat. The nervous way her fingers tightened around the violin bow. Even her eyes. God. Those eyes. She looked up at me fully for the first time. Confusion flickering across her face as the entire rooftop fell silent around us. Did I do something wrong? She asked softly. Her voice almost ruined me. I stared at the necklace resting against her collarbone. Small silver pendant. Worn at the edges. The exact same necklace I had spent 15 years trying to find. My throat tightened painfully. Where did you get that? I asked. She instinctively touched the pendant. My necklace, she said carefully. I've had it since I was a kid. Somewhere behind me, Marco's phone buzzed. Then mine did a second later. One message appeared on the screen. They know who she is. The message on my phone stayed on the screen like a threat carved into glass. They know who she is. My jaw tightened hard enough to hurt. Across from me, the violinist still stood frozen beneath the chandelier light, completely unaware that one text message had just changed the course of her life. Rain tapped softly against the rooftop windows while conversations slowly returned around us in nervous whispers. Nobody looked directly at me anymore. They never did after the room turned cold. The woman glanced between my face and the broken crystals scattered across the marble floor behind me. Are you okay? She asked carefully. Nobody had asked me that in years. The question caught me off guard more than the name had. I stared at her necklace again.
Silver encore pendant.
Scratched near the edge exactly where I remembered. 15 years ago, Small hands had shoved it into mine while smoke swallowed the sky above Brooklyn. I remembered coughing. Sirens. Flames reflected in terrified blue eyes. Take it, the little girl had whispered. So you do not forget me. I never had. Where did you get the necklace? I repeated quietly. Her fingers wrapped protectively around it this time. My grandmother gave it to me, she answered. At least that is what she told me. Her voice softened at the end, uncertain somehow, like even she did not fully believe the story.
Marco stepped beside me slowly.
I could feel the tension radiating off him without looking. Boss, he murmured under his breath. We should leave. I ignored him. What is your name? I asked her. Evelyn Hart. Evelyn. Not Điêu Thuyền. But names changed. Histories changed. Children disappeared all the time in this city if enough money moved through the right hands. I knew because my family built half those systems. The thought made something bitter twist inside my chest. Evelyn shifted awkwardly beneath my stare. Listen, she said nervously. If I know you from somewhere, I am sorry, but I really do not remember. The honesty in her voice felt dangerous. Real. Most people lied to me within the first 30 seconds. She did not. I noticed tiny details now that I stood close enough. The faint ink stain on her fingertips from sheet music. The loose thread near the sleeve of her white dress. The exhaustion hidden behind her calm expression. She looked nothing like the women who surrounded powerful men in Manhattan.
No diamonds.
No performance. No fear disguised as flirting. Just quiet warmth trying very hard not to panic. You play that song often? I asked. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. The violin piece? I nodded once. My grandmother used to hum it when I was little, she said softly. I do not even know where it came from. My pulse stumbled again. That melody had haunted me for 15 years. I heard it in nightmares. In empty penthouses at 3 in the morning. In every moment silence became too loud to survive. Marco's phone buzzed again. This time he stepped closer and lowered his voice further. We have a problem. 2 men downstairs asking questions about her. The air around me changed instantly. Cold. Focused. Controlled. Evelyn noticed it too. Did something happen? She asked quietly. I looked at her for a long moment before answering. Tell me something honestly, I said. Has anyone strange been following you recently? Her expression faltered. Just enough. Fear flickered across her face before she tried hiding it. Too late. I saw it. Why would you ask me that? She whispered. Because somewhere in this city, people had started hunting ghosts again. And after 15 years, they had finally found her. The rain had gotten heavier by the time Evelyn left the rooftop restaurant. Water streamed down the Manhattan sidewalks in silver rivers, while yellow taxi lights blurred across the wet streets below. I watched her through the tinted back window of my SUV as she pulled her coat tighter around herself and hurried toward the subway entrance with her violin case pressed against her chest.
No bodyguards.
No driver. No awareness that 3 different men had already photographed her tonight. She lives alone? I asked quietly. Marco sat across from me, tablet glowing faintly in his hands. Small apartment in Queens. 26 years old. Freelance violinist. Plays private events, weddings, charity galas. No criminal connections. No boyfriend. He paused. No real family either. Something about that last sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. I kept staring through the rain-streaked glass until Evelyn disappeared into the subway station. 15 years ago, another frightened girl had vanished into smoke the same way. I rubbed a hand slowly across my jaw, exhausted in a way sleep could never fix. What about the grandmother? I asked. Marco looked down at the file.
Vietnamese?
Immigrant. Died 6 years ago. Raised Evelyn after an apartment fire in Brooklyn when the girl was around 10. My chest tightened instantly. Apartment fire. Brooklyn. 10 years old. The timeline fit too perfectly. Find every record connected to that fire, I said. Hospital records. Adoption records. Insurance claims. Everything.
Marco hesitated carefully.
Adrian, if this really is her. I looked up sharply enough to silence him, because neither of us knew what terrified me more. The possibility that I had finally found her. Or the possibility that someone else had found her first. My phone buzzed again. Another encrypted message from security. Vehicle spotted outside her building last 3 nights. Unknown male driver. I read the text twice before locking the screen. Across the city, thunder rolled softly above the skyline. Put a team outside her apartment tonight, I ordered. Discreet. I do not want her frightened. Marco gave me a long look. You are protecting her already. The words should not have bothered me. But they did. As he was right. I barely knew this woman. Yet the thought of someone watching her from a parked car made something dangerously cold settle inside my chest. I leaned back against the leather seat and closed my eyes briefly. The melody from her violin still echoed in my head. I had spent years trying to forget that song. Years drowning memories beneath business deals, penthouses, tailored suits, and carefully controlled silence. None of it worked tonight. Because for the first time in 15 years, I remembered what my life sounded like before it became empty. Boss. Marco's voice pulled me back. There is something else. I opened my eyes slowly. Talk. One of the men downstairs recognized the necklace. My stomach turned hard. Who? Viktor Petrov's people. The name poisoned the air inside the SUV instantly. Petrov. Old money. Older enemies. The kind that smiled at charity galas while planning funerals behind closed doors. My fingers tightened against the armrest. Did they approach her? No. But they asked questions. Rain hammered harder against the roof now. Loud enough to almost cover the sound of my pulse. Almost. Then they know, I said quietly. Marco nodded once. Looks that way. Outside, the city lights stretched endlessly through the storm. Millions of people moving through Manhattan completely unaware that a war could begin over one forgotten girl with a violin and a silver necklace. I stared out at the rain for a long moment before speaking again. Do not let her out of your sight tonight. Marco studied me carefully. And if she notices? I thought about Evelyn standing beneath the chandelier light earlier, asking if I was okay with genuine concern in her eyes. Nobody had looked at me like that in years. Then make sure she never feels afraid, I said softly. Not while I am still breathing. Sleep never came easily after nights like that. By 4 in the morning, Manhattan looked hollow outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse. Rain still crawled down the glass in slow silver lines while the city below pulsed with distant headlights and insomnia. I loosened my tie and stared at the file spread across the marble kitchen counter.
Evelyn Hart.
26 years old.
No surviving relatives.
Music scholarship at Juilliard that she turned down 3 years ago because she could not afford housing in the city. Part-time work. Quiet life. Clean record. But the deeper Marco dug, the stranger everything became. Half her childhood records were missing. School transfers with no explanation. Hospital paperwork sealed under private authorization codes that should not have existed for a little girl from Brooklyn. Someone had erased pieces of her life very carefully, which meant someone powerful had wanted her hidden. My phone vibrated softly. Marco. Talk. She is moving. I glanced toward the clock. It is 4:30 in the morning. I know. I grabbed my coat immediately. Where is she going? Queens subway station. Alone. 20 minutes later, my SUV stopped across the street from a small 24-hour grocery store glowing under fluorescent lights. The neighborhood was quiet except for the sound of tires hissing over wet pavement. Evelyn stood near the entrance in an oversized cream sweater, holding a paper coffee cup with both hands while waiting for the crosswalk signal. She looked exhausted. Real exhausted. The kind that settled into your bones after years of carrying too much alone. That is her routine? I asked. Marco nodded from the front seat. Every Thursday morning. Coffee before rehearsal downtown. I watched her brush damp hair behind one ear while steam curled softly from her cup into the cold air. She looked nothing like the memory I had spent 15 years chasing, and somehow exactly like her at the same time. The crossing signal changed. Evelyn stepped into the street, then froze suddenly. Her eyes moved toward a dark sedan parked half a block away. I saw the exact second fear touched her face again. Small. Fast. But real. She lowered her head and walked faster toward the subway entrance. The sedan stayed parked. Who owns that vehicle? I asked quietly. Marco checked his tablet. Fake registration. Same car from the reports outside her building. Something cold settled inside me instantly. Evelyn disappeared down the subway stairs. 3 seconds later, the sedan doors opened. 2 men stepped out. Dark coats. Baseball caps pulled low. Moving too carefully for coincidence. Stay here, Marco warned immediately. I ignored him and opened the SUV door. Rain hit my face the second I stepped onto the sidewalk. The men noticed me halfway across the street. One of them paused. Recognition flashed across his expression instantly. Good. Fear followed right after. Better. They turned around without a word and walked back toward the sedan. Fast. By the time I reached the subway entrance, the car was already pulling away into traffic. Marco appeared beside me seconds later. Petrov's people, he muttered. Most likely. I barely heard him. Because halfway down the subway stairs, Evelyn stood clutching the railing tightly while trying to steady her breathing. She had seen them too. The fluorescent station lights made her pale skin look almost fragile against the gray concrete walls. She glanced up when she heard footsteps behind her. Surprise crossed her face immediately. You, she whispered. Her voice sounded smaller down here. More vulnerable. I stopped 3 steps above her. Close enough to see her. Hands trembling around the coffee cup. Those men upstairs, I said carefully. Have you seen them before? Evelyn looked away too quickly, which was answer enough. Twice, she admitted softly after a moment. Maybe 3 times. My jaw tightened. Why did you not go to the police? A sad little laugh escaped her lips. Because I live in New York. The answer should not have hurt the way it did. But it did. She looked back up at me then. Blue-gray eyes tired and uncertain beneath the harsh station lights. Who are you really? She asked quietly. The subway thundered somewhere beneath us. Loud enough to shake the floor. But not loud enough to drown out the truth sitting heavily between us both. Because for the first time in years I did not know whether protecting someone would save me, or destroy me completely. The subway roared past us in a rush of wind and steel, scattering strands of Evelyn's hair across her face. She tucked them back slowly, still watching me like she could not decide whether I was dangerous or simply strange. Maybe I was both. Around us, exhausted commuters moved through the station without paying attention. A woman in scrubs checked her phone near the tracks. A teenage boy slept against his backpack on the bench. Normal people. Ordinary lives. I wondered what that felt like. Evelyn tightened her grip on the paper coffee cup. You still did not answer my question, she said quietly. Who are you? I looked at her for a long moment before speaking. Someone who knew your grandmother. It was not a lie, but it was nowhere near the truth either. Her expression softened slightly with surprise. You knew bà ngoại. The Vietnamese word sounded gentle in her voice. Familiar. Another memory hit me without warning. Smoke thickened my lungs. Tiny trembling hands pressing against my cheek. Do not cry, the little girl had whispered in broken English while flames reflected in her eyes. You are still alive. I swallowed hard enough to hurt. Evelyn noticed. Are you okay? She asked again. God. That question. Nobody ever asked me that unless they wanted something afterward. Money. Protection. Favors. But Evelyn asked like she actually cared about the answer. I am fine, I said automatically. She gave me a small look that told me she did not believe me at all. Then she glanced nervously toward the station entrance behind us. Those men upstairs, she hesitated. You know who they are, do not you? I nodded once. Yes. And they are looking for me. Not a question this time. The truth settled heavily between us. Somewhere overhead, thunder rolled across Manhattan again. I exhaled slowly. Listen carefully to me, I said, lowering my voice. If you notice anyone following you again, you call this number immediately. I pulled a black business card from my coat pocket and handed it to her. No company name. No title. Just a phone number embossed in silver. Evelyn stared at it cautiously. That is very mysterious. That is intentional. A tiny laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Soft. Genuine. Caught me completely off guard. I had forgotten what real laughter sounded like. Not fake cocktail party laughter. Not forced politeness. Real warmth. For one dangerous second, the station around us disappeared entirely. Then her smile faded. I cannot afford trouble, she admitted quietly. I barely make rent as it is. The honesty in her voice twisted something deep inside my chest. She looked embarrassed admitting it. Like struggling alone had become normal for her. What rehearsal are you headed to at 5 in the morning? I asked gently. A symphony audition downtown. She shrugged lightly. The subway is less crowded this early. Of course it was. She organized her entire life around survival without even realizing it. You should not travel alone right now, I said immediately. Her eyebrows lifted. You say that like you expect me to own a private driver. I almost smiled despite myself. Almost. I can have someone take you. Absolutely not. The answer came so fast I nearly laughed. Evelyn hugged the violin case tighter against herself and shook her head firmly. I do not even know you. Fair. Completely fair. But the thought of her stepping onto another empty train platform alone while Petrov's people searched the city made my stomach tighten. You know enough, I said quietly. No, she whispered. I really do not. The train screeched into the station behind her, brakes screaming softly against the rails. Wind rushed through the platform again. Evelyn stepped backward toward the open doors, hesitation still written across her face. Then she looked at me one more time beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. You looked at me like you lost something important, she said softly. Why? My chest tightened so painfully I almost could not breathe. Because 15 years ago I had. And now she was standing right in front of me without remembering any of it. The train doors closed between us with a sharp mechanical sound that echoed through the station. Evelyn stood inside near the window, one hand wrapped around the violin case against her chest, while the other still held my black business card. She looked down at it once, then back at me. The expression in her eyes unsettled me more than fear would have. Curiosity. Like some part of her already recognized me even if her memories did not. The train pulled away slowly, metal grinding against the tracks until her face disappeared into darkness. I stood there long after the platform emptied. Boss. Marco's voice came carefully from behind me. We should move. I finally turned away from the tracks. I want every camera feed from that station reviewed, I said immediately. Find out how long Petrov's people have been watching her. Marco nodded once. Already started. We climbed back toward street level while rain continued falling over Queens in cold silver sheets. Dawn had not arrived yet, but the city was beginning to wake. Delivery trucks rumbled through intersections. Coffee carts released clouds of steam into the wet morning air. Somewhere nearby, music drifted faintly from an apartment window. Normal life continuing while mine quietly fell apart. The SUV waited at the curb. I slid into the back seat and loosened my tie again, exhausted in a way I had not felt since I was 19 years old and learning how cruel power could become. Marco handed me another folder. The fire records came through. My chest tightened immediately. I opened the file slowly. Brooklyn Warehouse District. 15 years ago. Electrical. Fire listed as official cause. Multiple casualties. Witnesses unavailable. Property later purchased through shell corporations connected to the Moretti family. I stared at the paper until the words blurred together. Because I remembered that night differently. I remembered smoke thick enough to choke on. Men shouting. Running footsteps. Fear so sharp it felt alive beneath my skin. I remembered hiding behind broken crates while a little girl knelt beside me with tears on her face. You cannot stay here, she had whispered desperately. They are looking for you. She could not have been older than 10. Small enough that her oversized sweater sleeves covered her hands completely. But brave enough to risk everything helping the son of the family responsible for destroying hers. My fingers tightened against the file. There is more, Marco said quietly. I looked up sharply. Talk. The grandmother was not her grandmother. The words hit harder than expected. What? No biological connection. We ran DNA archives through private databases. Marco slid another paper across the seat. The woman took Evelyn after the fire and disappeared with her for almost 6 years before resurfacing in Queens. My pulse slowed dangerously. Hidden. Protected. Moved around intentionally. Someone had spent years making sure Evelyn could never be found, which meant the people searching for her now probably knew exactly what she had seen that night. Does she know any of this? I asked. Marco shook his head.
No indication.
Good. Because the less Evelyn remembered right now, the safer she probably was. At least that was what I tried telling myself. My phone buzzed suddenly against the leather seat. Unknown number. I answered immediately. Silence greeted me first. Then breathing. Soft. Nervous. Hello. Evelyn's voice came quietly through the line. Every muscle in my body locked instantly. How did you get this number? She asked. Despite everything, I almost smiled. It is literally printed on the card I gave you. A tiny embarrassed laugh escaped her. Warm enough to wreck me all over again. Right.
Sorry.
She hesitated. I almost did not call. But you did. Another silence stretched. Between us. I could hear subway noise faintly in the background. Then her voice lowered slightly. The same car is outside the music hall now. Cold fury settled into my chest instantly. Are you inside? Yes. Stay there. Wait, she said quickly. Please do not send security guards or anything insane like that. Too late for insane. Way too late. I leaned forward sharply. Evelyn, listen to me very carefully. Whatever is happening around you right now is not random anymore. Her breathing caught softly through the phone. You really think I am in danger? I closed my eyes briefly. Because the truth was so much worse than that. I think someone spent 15 years waiting for you to reappear, I said quietly. And I think they finally realized you are alive. The drive downtown took less than 12 minutes, but it felt longer because Evelyn stayed on the phone the entire time. I could hear the nervous tremble she kept trying to hide beneath polite conversation. Outside the SUV windows, Manhattan blurred into rain and headlights while dawn slowly turned the skyline pale gray. You really do not have to come here yourself, she said softly through the speaker. You sound very busy being mysterious somewhere else. Despite everything pressing against my chest, a quiet laugh almost escaped me. Almost. I am already on my way. Silence settled briefly between us before she spoke again. That is not normal, you know. What is not? Dropping everything for someone you met yesterday. The words hit harder than they should have. Because she was right. None of this was normal. Not the way I could not stop thinking about her voice. Not the way hearing fear in her breathing made something protective and reckless wake up inside me after years of feeling absolutely nothing. I stared out at the rain sliding down the SUV window. Maybe I am not a normal person, I said quietly. Evelyn gave a soft hum through the phone. Yeah, I figured that part out already. By the time we reached the music hall near Lincoln Center, the rain had slowed into mist. Marco stepped out first, scanning the sidewalk while commuters hurried beneath umbrellas toward the morning rush. Across the street, the same dark sedan remained parked beneath a flickering street lamp. Empty now. That bothered me more than if the men had still been inside. Where is she? I asked immediately. Marco checked his earpiece. Third floor rehearsal room. I entered the building without another word. Warm air smelling faintly of coffee and polished wood wrapped around me instantly. Somewhere above us, piano scales echoed through the hallways. Musicians moved between rehearsal rooms carrying instrument cases and sheet music, too distracted to notice the tension surrounding me. Evelyn stood alone near the end of the corridor beside a vending machine, violin case resting against the wall at her feet. She looked up the second she saw me. Relief crossed her face before she could hide it. The sight nearly destroyed what little control I still had left. You actually came, she whispered. I slowed in front of her, taking in every detail automatically. Pale blue sweater. Hair tied loosely back. Dark circles beneath tired eyes. No visible injuries. Thank God. Did they approach you? I asked immediately. She shook her head. No. They just stayed outside. Her fingers tightened around the paper coffee cup in her hands. But they keep showing up everywhere. I looked toward the hallway windows overlooking the street below. The sedan was gone now. Wrong. Too quiet. You should not stay here today, I said. Evelyn blinked in surprise. Excuse me. Come with me. The words left my mouth before I could soften them. Her eyebrows lifted instantly. That sounds exactly like something a serial killer would say. I stared at her for 2 full seconds before an actual laugh escaped my chest unexpectedly. Low. Rusted from lack of use. Evelyn looked shocked enough to forget her fear for a moment. Wow, she murmured. You can laugh. Rarely. The corner of her mouth twitched despite herself. Then her expression turned serious again. I cannot just disappear with you, she said carefully. I have rehearsal. Bills. A life. The word life settled heavily between us. Because the truth was her old life was already slipping away piece by piece. She just did not know it yet. Evelyn. Her name sounded rough in my voice. Too personal already. The men following you are connected to dangerous people. And you are not? Smart woman. I stepped closer carefully, lowering my voice. I am the reason they have not touched you. Her breath caught softly. Fear flickered across her face again. But something else lived there too now. Trust trying very hard not to exist. Somewhere downstairs, the front doors of the music hall opened loudly. Marco's voice crackled sharply through my earpiece a second later. Adrian. Every instinct inside me went cold instantly. We have a problem. Every muscle in my body tightened the second Marco spoke through the earpiece. Petrov just entered the building. The hallway suddenly felt too small. Too exposed. Evelyn noticed the shift in my expression immediately. What happened? She whispered. I looked straight at her. We are leaving. Adrian. Now. Something in my voice must have convinced her this was no longer optional. She grabbed her violin case without arguing again while I pressed a hand lightly against the small of her back, guiding her toward the emergency stairwell at the end of the corridor. The contact lasted less than a second. Still, I felt her inhale sharply beneath it. The stairwell door slammed shut behind us, muting the noise of the music hall instantly. Concrete walls. Dim fluorescent lights. The sharp scent of rain drifting through old ventilation systems. Evelyn looked up at me while we moved quickly down the stairs. You are scaring me, she admitted softly. The honesty in her voice cut deeper than fear ever could. I slowed slightly beside her. I know. Then tell me the truth. Her footsteps echoed behind mine. Who are these people? I gripped the railing tighter. Because there were truths that could never be spoken gently. Men connected to my past. And somehow I am connected too. Not a question. Smart. Too smart. We reached the underground parking level seconds later. Marco already waited beside the SUV with 2 security men positioned near the exit. The tension in the garage felt sharp enough to taste. Evelyn stopped walking. Okay, she said quietly. I think I officially crossed into the part of life where I should panic. Despite everything, I looked at her. Really looked at her. Pale hair slightly messy from the rain. Violin case still clutched protectively against her chest. Terrified but trying very hard to stay calm anyway. Brave. God, she had always been brave. Get inside the car, I said gently. Please. The word surprised both of us. Evelyn blinked softly before climbing into the SUV without another argument. The second the doors locked behind her, Marco stepped closer to me. Petrov has 6 men upstairs asking for the violinist by name. Cold fury settled into my chest instantly. How? Unknown.
Marco hesitated briefly.
But someone leaked the gala footage. Of course they did. In this city, secrets survived only until money changed hands. I glanced through the tinted SUV window. Evelyn sat inside hugging her violin case tightly while anxiety shadowed her entire expression. She looked completely out of place surrounded by armored security vehicles and men carrying hidden weapons beneath tailored coats. Yet somehow, seeing her there felt terrifyingly natural to me already. Boss. Marco lowered his voice carefully. If Petrov realizes who she really is. I cut him off sharply. He does not get near her. Marco studied my face for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. Understanding. Dangerous understanding. You care about her. The words landed harder than expected. Because I did. More than made sense. More than was safe. More than I could explain without reopening every part of myself I spent years burying beneath power and control. I looked away toward the garage entrance where rainwater reflected against the concrete floor in trembling silver patterns. 15 years ago, A frightened little girl had pulled me from smoke and sirens and whispered that I still deserved to survive. Nobody had spoken to me like a human being since. Until Evelyn. My phone buzzed suddenly. Unknown encrypted number. I answered immediately. A familiar older voice filled the line. Calm. Dangerous. Adrian. I went completely still. Viktor Petrov. You found the girl before I did, he said softly. My jaw tightened hard enough to ache. Stay away. From her. A low chuckle came through the speaker. Interesting. Silence stretched between us like a loaded weapon. Then Petrov spoke again. Does she remember what happened that night? My pulse slowed dangerously. No good. His voice turned colder somehow. Because if her memories return, both our families burn with them. The line disconnected instantly. For one full second, the garage became absolutely silent around me. Then the SUV door opened softly behind me. I turned. Evelyn stood there holding the silver necklace tightly in her hand, blue-gray eyes trembling with confusion and fear. What happened 15 years ago? She whispered. And for the first time since finding her again, I realized the truth might destroy her far more completely than the lies ever did. Rain hammered against the roof of the underground garage while Evelyn stared at me like her entire world had just tilted sideways. The silver necklace trembled slightly in her hand beneath the fluorescent lights. What happened 15 years ago? She whispered again. Marco and the others moved away quietly, giving us space without being told. Smart men. They understood instinctively that this moment was more dangerous than any weapon. I looked at Evelyn for a long time before answering. Because some truths change people forever once spoken out loud. There was a fire, I said finally. In Brooklyn. Her breathing slowed. Uneven now. I know about the fire, she said softly. My grandmother used to say I stopped speaking for almost a year afterward. My chest tightened painfully. Of course she had. No child survived a night like that unchanged. Evelyn looked down at the necklace in her palm. I remember pieces sometimes, she admitted quietly. Smoke. Sirens. Someone crying. Her eyes lifted back to mine. Was that you? The garage suddenly felt too small to breathe inside. I stepped closer before I could stop myself. Yes. One word. Barely more than air. But it shattered something fragile between us anyway. Evelyn stared at me silently while rain echoed through the concrete structure around us. I do not understand, she whispered. Why would dangerous people care about something that happened when I was a child? Because powerful men built empires on buried secrets. Because one little girl saw things she was never supposed to survive seeing. Because my family and Petrov's family had spent 15 years pretending that night never happened. I exhaled slowly. You witnessed something important, I said carefully. Your grandmother hid you afterward to protect you. From who? Her voice cracked slightly at the end. I swallowed hard. From people like me. The honesty of it landed heavily between us. Evelyn looked at me like she wanted to step backward and closer at the same time. Fear and trust fighting quietly inside her chest. You keep saying you are dangerous, she said softly. But every time I was scared you showed up. God, that nearly destroyed me. I looked away briefly toward the rain-soaked garage entrance because I suddenly could not handle the way she was looking at me. Nobody had ever trusted me gently before. Fearfully, yes. Respectfully sometimes. But gently? Never. Adrian, she whispered. My name sounded different in her voice. Softer somehow. Human. Why do I feel like I know you? The question pulled another memory loose without warning. Small fingers clutching my sleeve while smoke curled through broken windows. Promise me you will stay alive, the little girl had cried. Please. I closed my eyes briefly. 15 years ago, I had failed almost everyone I ever loved. My mother. My brother. Myself. But somehow this girl still stood in front of me alive after everything the world did to erase her. Evelyn took one slow step closer. You looked lonely the first moment I saw you, she admitted quietly. I just did not expect lonely people to travel with security teams. A rough laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Lonely people build strange defenses. Her lips curved softly for the first time since the phone call. Small. Beautiful. Real. The sight of it hit harder than fear ever had. Then her expression changed suddenly. Confusion flickered across her face as she stared past me toward the far wall of the garage. Wait, she whispered. Her hand tightened around the necklace. I remember something. Every instinct inside me sharpened instantly. What? Evelyn's breathing quickened. That night, there was music. Her eyes widened slowly. Someone was playing violin nearby while the building burned. My pulse stopped cold. 'Cause I remembered it too. A broken melody drifting through smoke while chaos swallowed the city whole. Evelyn looked directly at me then. Fear and realization mixing together beneath the fluorescent lights. You were there before the fire started, she whispered. You were not hiding from it. Silence crashed between us. Heavy. Dangerous. Because she was finally beginning to remember the part of the story I could never survive her knowing completely. The rain outside the garage softened into a steady whisper, but the silence between Evelyn and me felt deafening. She stood frozen a few feet away. Blue-gray eyes locked onto mine while pieces of her memory slowly returned like ghosts crawling through smoke. You were there before the fire started, she repeated quietly. Why? I looked down briefly, jaw tightening hard enough to ache. Because there was no clean way to explain what kind of family I came from. No gentle version of the truth. My father owned that building, I admitted finally. Evelyn's expression shifted instantly. Confusion first. Then realization. Owned, she whispered. I nodded once. There was a meeting that night. Families. Deals. People with too much power making decisions that destroyed other people. Her breathing became uneven again. I hated myself for being the reason. And the fire? She asked carefully. It was not supposed to happen. The words sounded hollow even to me. Nothing about that night had gone the way anyone planned. I remembered raised voices behind closed doors. Men arguing in Italian. The sharp smell of whiskey and cigar smoke filling the warehouse office upstairs. Then panic. Running footsteps. Someone yelling my father's name. After that, only chaos remained. I remember finding you near the back staircase, I said quietly. You were crying, but you still tried helping me first. Evelyn stared at me like she could not decide whether to step closer or run. Why would I help you? The question hit deeper than she realized. Because 15 years later, I still did not understand it either. I do not know, I answered honestly. Most people would not have. Her eyes dropped to the necklace in her hand again. I remember giving this to someone. My pulse stumbled painfully. You gave it to me. She looked back up sharply. You kept it. I almost laughed at the impossibility of the question. For 15 years. The confession settled heavily between us. Rainwater dripped softly from pipes somewhere deeper in the garage while headlights passed briefly across the concrete entrance outside. Evelyn swallowed hard. Why? Because after that night, nothing human survived inside me except the memory of one frightened little girl who still believed I deserved saving. But I could not say that out loud. Not yet. Instead, I stepped closer slowly until only a few feet separated us. Because you were the only person who ever looked at me without fear. Her breath caught softly. God. Even now she looked at me the same way. Careful. Curious. Kind despite every reason not to be. My phone buzzed suddenly against my coat pocket. Marco. I answered without taking my eyes off Evelyn. What? We need to move now. His voice sounded sharp.
Urgent.
Petrov's men just left the music hall. They are searching nearby buildings. Evelyn's face paled instantly at the name. Who is Petrov? She whispered. I closed my eyes briefly. Someone who knows exactly what happened that night. And he thinks I remember. Eventually you will. Fear flickered across her expression again. But underneath it now lived something more dangerous. Trust. She hated that she trusted me already. I could see it in the way her fingers tightened around the necklace instead of stepping away from me completely. Adrian, she said softly. My name in her voice still felt like something I had not earned. If your family was involved, why are you helping me? The answer came too quickly. Too honestly. Because if they touch you again, I will burn every part of this city down to stop it. Silence crashed between us immediately after the words left my mouth. I had not meant to say them aloud. Evelyn stared at me stunned. Not frightened this time. Just overwhelmed. Then very carefully, like approaching a wounded animal, she reached out and touched the sleeve of my coat. Small fingers, warm against the cold fabric. The contact lasted barely a second. Still, my entire body locked around it. Evelyn looked up at me beneath the harsh garage lights, eyes softer now than I had seen them yet. "You really have been alone for a long time," she whispered. And somehow, hearing pity in her voice terrified me more than every enemy waiting outside combined. The touch lasted less than a heartbeat, but after years of empty penthouses and colder conversations, it felt catastrophic. Evelyn pulled her hand back slowly, like she had only realized afterward what she had done. Her fingers curled tightly around the silver necklace again, while Rain whispered outside the garage entrance. I should have stepped away. I should have remembered exactly what kind of man I was. Instead, I stayed there looking at her like someone starving watching sunlight for the first time in years. Marco approached carefully from the far side of the SUV. "The route is secure," he said quietly. His eyes moved between Evelyn and me for one brief second before he looked away again. "Smart man." Evelyn glanced toward the black SUV waiting nearby. "Route to where?" she asked. I answered immediately. "Somewhere safe." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "You keep saying that like safe places actually exist around you." "Fair. Painfully fair." I opened the rear passenger door for her anyway. "Get in the car, Evelyn." She hesitated this time, not because she wanted to refuse, because she understood stepping into that vehicle meant her old life was officially ending. I could see the realization settling heavily across her face. The music hall. Her apartment in Queens. Subway rides at 5 in the morning. Small coffee cups warming cold hands before rehearsals. All of it suddenly felt very far away from this underground garage and the dangerous truth breathing between us. "If I go with you," she said softly, "am I ever getting my normal life back?" The question cut deeper than she knew, because I had been asking myself the same thing since the moment I saw her on that rooftop. I looked at her honestly. Probably not. Fear flickered across her expression again, but she still climbed into the SUV anyway. That terrified me more than if she had run. The city blurred outside the tinted windows as we drove uptown through rain-covered streets. Manhattan looked softer in storms, less cruel somehow. Golden lights reflected across wet pavement, while steam curled from subway grates into the cold morning air. Evelyn sat beside me in silence for most of the drive, violin case resting across her lap while her fingers absent-mindedly traced the edge of the silver necklace. Thinking, remembering. "My grandmother used to panic whenever strangers asked questions about me," she said quietly after several minutes. I turned toward her immediately. "What kind of questions?" "Where I was born. Whether I remembered my parents. Things like that." Her eyes stayed on the rain outside the window. I thought she was just overprotective. My jaw tightened. "She was protecting you." Evelyn swallowed hard. "From your family?" The shame that came with that question settled heavily into my chest, because the answer was complicated and ugly. "From everyone connected to that night," I admitted. Silence filled the SUV again. Then Evelyn asked the question I had dreaded most. "Did my parents die in the fire?" I closed my eyes briefly. 15 years later, I still remembered the smell of smoke clinging to my clothes afterward. The sirens. The screaming. The unbearable silence once everything finally stopped burning. "I do not know," I said quietly. It was the truth, and somehow that made it worse. Evelyn nodded once, staring down at her hands now. "I always felt like something was missing," she whispered. "Like everyone around me knew part of my life except me." Her voice cracked slightly at the end. Instinctively, before thinking, I reached over and covered her trembling hand with mine. Warm skin against cold fingers. She froze softly beneath the contact. So did I. "You are not alone anymore," I said before I could stop myself. The words settled into the quiet space between us immediately. Dangerous. Intimate. Honest in a way I had not been with anyone for years. Evelyn slowly lifted her eyes to mine. Something vulnerable lived there now beneath the fear. "That sounds like a promise," she whispered. My thumb brushed lightly against the side of her hand once before I pulled away. "It is." The SUV turned through black iron gates a moment later, revealing the massive estate hidden behind stone walls overlooking the Hudson River. Evelyn stared out the window in shock as the gates closed behind us automatically. "Adrian," she breathed carefully, "what exactly do you do for a living?" I almost answered her. I almost told her everything. Then my phone buzzed with a single incoming photo from Marco's security team. A picture of Evelyn's apartment door in Queens. Broken open. The photo stayed on my screen for 3 full seconds before I locked the phone again. But it was already too late. Evelyn saw my expression change. Fear moved across her face instantly. "What happened?" she whispered. The SUV rolled slowly through the estate driveway while rain dripped from massive oak trees lining the property. Ahead of us, the mansion rose above the Hudson like something built to intimidate storms themselves. Stone walls, iron balconies, warm golden lights glowing through towering windows. A fortress pretending to be a home. I looked back at Evelyn carefully. "Someone broke into your apartment." Her face lost color immediately. "What?" I handed her the phone silently. She stared at the image with widening eyes. Her front door hung partially off the hinges. Drawers ripped open. Sheet music scattered across the hallway floor. The tiny apartment she fought so hard to afford looked violated somehow even in a photograph. Evelyn covered her mouth softly with one hand. "Oh my God." The SUV stopped beneath the covered entrance. Nobody moved for a moment. Rain hammered against the roof overhead while the engine idled quietly around us. Then Evelyn whispered the question I already knew was coming. "Was this because of me?" I shook my head once. No, her eyes lifted slowly to mine. "Because of you?" The honesty in her voice hurt more than accusations would have. Because she deserved the truth. At least part of it. Because someone believes you remember something dangerous, I said quietly. Evelyn looked down at the photo again. Her hands trembled now. "I barely remember my own childhood," she whispered. "How can memories matter this much?" Because powerful men feared truth more than death. Because hidden secrets built entire empires. Because somewhere buried inside Evelyn's fractured memories lived the one thing capable of destroying families like mine forever. But I could not say that yet. Not until I knew exactly what she remembered. Marco opened the SUV door beside me. "Inside," he said carefully. "Perimeter is secure." Evelyn climbed out slowly, still clutching the phone in one hand and her violin case in the other. I stepped beside her immediately as cold winds swept rain across the stone courtyard. She looked impossibly small standing in front of the mansion. Not weak. Never weak. Just human in a world that had suddenly become monstrous around her. "This place is insane," she murmured softly while staring up at the estate. The corner of my mouth almost moved. "That is the nicest thing anyone has ever called it." A faint laugh escaped her despite everything. Tired. Fragile. But real. God help me, I would have destroyed cities to hear that sound again already. We entered the mansion through massive iron doors that closed heavily behind us, sealing out the storm. Warmth wrapped around us instantly. Marble floors reflected chandelier light across the enormous foyer, while a fireplace crackled softly somewhere deeper inside the house. Evelyn stopped walking completely. "Adrian," she whispered carefully, "you live here." Unfortunately. She turned slowly in place, taking everything in. The towering staircase. The oil paintings. The silence stretching through rooms far too large for one person. Then her expression changed. "It is beautiful," she admitted softly. "But it feels lonely." The observation hit harder than it should have. As she was right again. Every room inside this house echoed with absence. My family gone. My mother's piano untouched for years. Dinner tables built for 12 used by one exhausted man who no longer remembered what peace felt like. Evelyn glanced toward me uncertainly. "Do you ever get used to this much emptiness?" I looked at her for a long moment before answering. No, something softened in her expression instantly. Understanding. Dangerous, beautiful understanding. A housekeeper appeared quietly from the hallway carrying folded towels. Evelyn startled slightly before apologizing immediately. "Sorry. This entire day feels unreal." "You are safe here," I said gently. The words came automatically now whenever she looked afraid. She studied my face carefully like she was searching for something hidden beneath it. Then she asked the question I had avoided all morning. Who exactly is Viktor Petrov? Silence settled through the foyer instantly. Even the housekeeper stopped moving for half a second before disappearing quietly down another hallway. I exhaled slowly. Someone my father once trusted. Evelyn frowned softly. And now? I looked toward the rain-covered windows overlooking the river. Now he wants something only you can give him. Her breathing slowed unevenly. What? I finally looked back at her. The truth about what happened the night your family disappeared. The fireplace crackled softly behind us while rain streaked down the massive windows overlooking the Hudson River. Evelyn stood motionless in the center of the foyer, her violin case resting beside her feet as my words settled heavily between us. The truth about what happened the night your family disappeared. I watched confusion and fear move across her face at the same time. My family, she whispered carefully, like the words themselves felt unfamiliar. You keep saying that like you know who they were. I loosened my tie slowly, exhausted in ways sleep could never fix. I know enough. Evelyn shook her head immediately. No. You know more than you are telling me. Smart. Always too smart. The chandelier light caught the silver necklace in her trembling hand, while silence stretched through the enormous mansion around us. Finally, she looked directly at me. Were my parents involved with your family? I should have lied. I should have protected her from the ugliness connected to my name. Instead, I answered honestly. Yes. The word hit her visibly. She took a small step backward without realizing it. In what way? I looked toward the fire briefly before speaking. Your father worked for mine. Her eyebrows pulled together in confusion. Doing what? My jaw tightened. Accounting. Moving money. Keeping records no one else was supposed to see. Evelyn stared at me like the floor beneath her had disappeared. My father was a criminal? No, the answer came immediately. Your father was a good man trapped around dangerous people. Something about that seemed to hurt her even more. Because good people were not supposed to disappear. Then why did he die? She whispered. The question punched straight through my chest. I swallowed hard. I do not know if he did. Her breath caught sharply. What? For the first time since entering the mansion, real emotion cracked fully across her face. Hope. Terrified hope. I stepped closer carefully. After the fire, no bodies matching your parents were ever recovered. Evelyn's hand flew instinctively to her mouth. Tears filled her eyes almost instantly, though she blinked hard trying not to let them fall. My grandmother always avoided answering questions about them, she whispered. Every birthday I asked if they loved me and she would just cry. God, I hated this. Hated watching pain unfold across someone so gentle while knowing my family helped create it. Evelyn. My voice sounded rougher now. There are still missing parts of the story. Because somebody buried them. Not a question. I nodded once. Yes. She looked down at the necklace again. And somehow I remember enough to scare people. More than enough. Silence settled heavily around us again until Evelyn suddenly frowned slightly. Wait. She looked up slowly. You said my father kept records. Every instinct inside me sharpened instantly. Yes. Then maybe that is what I saw. The room went completely still. Evelyn's breathing quickened as fragmented memories flickered behind her eyes. I remember papers, she whispered. Boxes maybe. My father yelling at someone. She pressed trembling fingers against her temple. And music. There was violin music playing somewhere nearby. My pulse slowed. Dangerously. Because that detail mattered. Too much. Evelyn, I said carefully. Do you remember who your father was arguing with? She closed her eyes tightly, fighting through the fractured memories. No. But I remember another voice. Her eyes opened again slowly. Fear flooded them instantly. I know that voice. Cold moved through my chest. Whose? Evelyn stared directly at me beneath the chandelier light, pale and shaking now. Viktor Petrov. Silence crashed through the mansion. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled across the Hudson River. I looked away briefly because for 15 years, I had prayed she never remembered that name. Evelyn took one unsteady breath before speaking again. Adrian, she whispered softly. I think Petrov was there the night my family disappeared. My phone buzzed sharply against my coat pocket at the exact same moment. Marco. I answered immediately. What? His voice came low and tense through the line. Boss. Petrov just arrived at the front gate.